The Cincinnati Reds trade deadline plan is in full effect as the deadline nears next Monday or Tuesday. I forget which day it is. But we will give you our thoughts on what the Reds deadline plan is on today's bonus episode of the Locked On Reds podcast.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds. Thanks for making this live bonus edition of Locked On Reds your second listen of the day. And thanks for always making us your first listen on every other day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are free and available on all podcasting platforms. We are your team every day. I'm Steve Offenbaker. He is Jeff De La Carr, apparently. And we are diehard baseball fans. We have a passion for the Cincinnati Reds. We have taken our love of the game, our passion for baseball, and we have turned that passion into information for you. On today's podcast, Everydayers, we're going to dig into the fallout, I guess, from the Lucas Giolito trade going down with the Angels. We're going to talk about how that impacts the Reds. We're going to try and project where Nick Krall may go from here. And of course, we're going to spend a whole lot of time taking your questions and comments in the comment section right here on YouTube. For the folks catching this later in the audio feed, as always, you will get it all, maybe split up into 2 episodes, but it'll all be in the feed for you as well. All right, Jeff, let's dig into this thing because the Angels went a whole different direction. We've been speculating for months now. Shohei Ohtani is finding a new home. They're going to blow it up. They're going to scrap it. They're going to start over. And instead, they kind of are going for it.
Yeah, in the span of what I believe was 3 hours, they announced that they were not trading Shohei Ohtani, and then they traded for Lucas Giolito from the White Sox. They also got Reynaldo Lopez, a right-handed relief pitcher from Chicago, that a couple of folks are kind of bullish on, said that he was getting unlucky. Some of his stats don't quite tell the whole story. But for that, the Angels sent catching prospect Edgar Quero, and they sent left-handed pitching prospect Kai Bush to the Chicago White Sox, where some folks are kind of differing on their opinions of the trade. They believe that the 2 prospects together is an overpay for Giolito and Kai Bush. I believe, and our Locked On Angels guys can speak more to this, I believe that whatever the cost is, if you can convince Shohei Ohtani to stay in Anaheim, then I don't think there's a prospect cost I wouldn't pay. But besides all of that, they have you covered on Locked On Angels with all that good stuff. But if we are to compare that to what the Reds would trade, and I'm basing this off of Baseball America rankings right now, then I would wonder if you would do it. I would wonder if the folks in the comment section here today would do it, because according to Baseball America, Edgar Quero was a top 100 prospect. He was number 84 on their midseason rankings. That would put him right next to Christian Encarnacion Strand. And then Kai Bush, he's outside the top 100, but he was the Angels' number 3 pitcher in their or number 3 prospect in their organization, just outside the top 100. That means that you're looking at Connor Phillips. So you would be trading a Reds equivalent of a pitcher who is highly ranked in the Reds organization, but outside the Baseball America top 100. You would be trading a position player around the Baseball America like 80 range for the rental of Lucas Giolito. His contract is up at the end of the year, and the rental of Reynaldo Lopez. What are your thoughts on whether the Reds should have done that deal?
Absolutely not. There is not a scenario in the world where I would be on board with this. Again, I think that Nick Krall has the opportunity to go and get guys and make trades, but that's not the trade. That's not when we talk about dealing from depth and bringing back pitching in return. You're not trading away a Connor Phillips that right now is mowing down 2 different levels of minor league baseball and appears ready to be a major league pitcher. You're not trading that guy away for a rental. I mean, you might as well just call up Connor Phillips. On the other side of that, CES trading him away, he's going to be hitting for power for a long time. And again, that's not the type of player you move for a rental. If you're going to move players that are still in the minor leagues, I would have heartburn with trading Noelvi Marte, but that's the guy you move. I would have less heartburn if they package some guys together with, say, a Reese Hines and combine that with a couple other dudes for, again, what would be a 4th or 5th starter and some bullpen help. That's where the Reds should be looking. At this point, you're not looking for a guy that could be slotted in as a number 2 or a number 3. The price is too high there, Jeff.
Yeah, that price, when I saw it go down. So I'm not saying it's an overpay for the Angels, because I believe that their motivations are completely different than the Reds. The Reds are just opening up their window of contention. The Angels are doing their darndest to convince that Shohei Ohtani should stay in Anaheim. So there's a price there, a price difference there. And honestly, too, as apples to apples, as I try to make this comparison, I don't even necessarily know that that's fair, because the Reds farm system is so much better than the Angels farm system. And it's very possible that the deal is not apples to apples like I'm setting it up. But even still, if you're telling me that we have to give up a not only top organizational prospect, but a top 100 prospect for a rental pitcher that would slot in the 2 or 3 range, yeah, I'm completely out on that. Let's go back to talking about like Lance Lynn and guys like that. We've got some questions about like specific targets that we'll get into here in a little bit from our subtexters. But I wanted to kind of continue this look real fast, because Giolito was a guy that was on the Reds' radar. I don't necessarily know that I saw any specific tweets or mentions that, yes, the Reds had called on Lucas Giolito, but there were mentions that the Reds have called the White Sox about pitching and who is available. So I'm sure he came up in the conversation between Nick Krall and Rick Hahn. So when you think about this, there was a quote that Nick Krall had before the Brewers series where he said, yeah, there's nothing out there right now because everyone's price is just so high. It's kind of price gouging the market right now. So I think what Nick Krall is saying here is that if we see some deals, and I thought about this last night whenever the news was announced, it was like 10:30 at night, almost 11, whenever the news was announced of the trade. But I thought of this and I said, okay, whatever we see right now in this next like day or two period probably are the trades that Nick Krall wanted no part of.
No, absolutely. I think, I was talking with Paul Keels about this just a little while ago, Jeff, when we could see a potential deal. And what makes the most sense to me in my mind is for Nick Krall to wait to the very last minute. That whatever deal the Reds are going to make will come 10 minutes before the trade deadline, when a team is getting desperate, hasn't found a trade partner, has somebody they want to move so that they don't just let them walk, or they need to cut some payroll. It'll be then. It'll be right at that last second where Nick Krall can do that Nick Krall thing and maybe, get a discount, get a deal, get a 2-for-1, as they say.
Shopping at TJ Maxx. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. That's something.
I think that's how that plays out.
That's something that I think that the Reds should be honed in on. And I think Nick Krall knows this. And this is where we come back to what we have said multiple times, basically ever since last year. We trust Nick Krall. Like, the move that he's going to make is going to be the right move. It's not going to be something that you kind of squint at. Like, the Reds aren't going to go find the 2023 version of Gary Majeski, Bill Bray, and I'm blanking on the shortstop's name, with that stupid Nationals trade where they sent Felipe Lopez and Austin Kearns to Washington. It's not going to be one of those trades. It's not going to be the Frank Robinson from El Papas. We're not going to be talking about a bad trade. Nick Krall, I am under the impression, and I know that he's only had a couple of years under his belt with the trading. I don't think Nick Krall makes a bad trade, and I don't think that we will see him make a bad trade this year. So I believe that whatever he ends up doing, it's going to be something that we sit back and we go, how about that? I like that deal. I like it a lot.
My little tribute there to Paul Keels is getting some reaction over in the chat server. Paul Keels has been really good to us. We love that guy. And yes, OH, baby, OH. But I want to sidetrack this into a Buckeye talk because Jeff will be sad. But let's stick with the Reds here. Jeff, as we progress closer and closer to this trade deadline, the conversation becomes basically two parts. It's less about who can the Reds target and more about should the Reds target anybody. There's two camps. It's pretty evenly split amongst Reds country. People wanting them to make a trade versus people wanting them to stand pat. Where do you land on this stand pat conversation? Are you going to be, let me rephrase this for you. Will you be upset, angry, disappointed? How will you feel if Nick Krall does nothing, if he can't find a reasonable trade partner and the Reds just have to roll with what they've got?
I like that question, and I'm going to answer that question coming up next. We've got a lot of questions coming in. We've got some questions from Subtext. We've got some thoughts that we're going to jump into, including, yes, will I be okay if they stand pat, but also what could the Reds look at if they're looking at anything? What's the cost going to be? That's coming up next. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, and that is Ibotta. Finally taking that summer vacation that you've been planning, but dreading buying all of the necessities before you take off. It's time to stop spending your hard-earned money without getting anything in return. Enter Ibotta. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure that you're beating inflation matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 a year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or you could use that cash back to buy the flight that you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or that fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points and don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta. Just use the code MLB whenever you register. So go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code MLB. That's Ibotta, I-B-O-T-T-A, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code MLB.
Jeff, before you jump into the next thing, we have some breaking news here on a live Thursday show, not Reds related, but division related. The Milwaukee Brewers are acquiring Carlos Santana from the Pittsburgh Pirates. That deal is being reported right now across all major
interesting in-division trade, huh?
Yeah, in-division trade for a bit of a power bat.
A bit of a power bat. I think Carlos Santana was a power hitter 3 years ago. I think he's got solid plate discipline. He'll get on base. It's funny because our pal Chuck Freeman over at Locked On Brewers, who, if you saw Ben Lively's post-game interview, was actually in the shot, standing behind Ben Lively asking questions. He was of the impression, and he has been of the impression all year long, that the biggest need the Brewers have is a cleanup hitter. I don't know that Carlos Santana gets that done, though.
Looks like going back to Pittsburgh in the deal is 18-year-old shortstop Johnny. I lost it just now. Sorry, Jeff. Severino. Johnny Severino. 18-year-old shortstop going back to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Not a needle mover for you then?
No, and the it's interesting because we were talking about this yesterday before we get back to our trade discussion, is that the Brewers aren't good. Like, I mean, they're over 500, but they aren't that great against teams not named the Cincinnati Reds. Like, I think they have a negative run differential against all other teams by like negative 21. So we'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe Carlos Santana does help them out, but I don't think that's the cleanup hitter. Like, I mean, who's better between Carlos Santana and Rowdy Tellez? Like, I think they're kind of the same guy. It's just Rowdy Tellez is hurt right now. So I'm not that worried about that. I think at the end of the day, and we'll talk more about the Brewers later, but at the end of the day, I think that's going to work itself out. The whole will the Reds play the Brewers in the playoffs thing, I don't think it's going to be that bad. Let's get back to the fun stuff. Let's talk about. We'll make sure we get some nice beverage or something before we start talking about the Brewers again. Let's go back to the trade deadline, because you asked me whether I would be upset if the Reds stand pat, and the answer is no, because I trust that Nick Krall just was not able to find anything. And I don't think he's going to force this. I don't think he's going to be on the phone with somebody at 5:59 p.m. on August 1st, and he hasn't made a trade yet, and somebody's just like, we want you to send Noelvi Marte and we'll send you our middle reliever. He's not going to be goaded into making a bad trade. And I think that is where the trust really falls. Like, I think we're all under the assumption that we trust Nick Krall to make the right trade, but how much do you trust him if he makes no trade? And I still trust him the same amount.
So this is how I kind of equate it. I know that you and I both spent a lot of time talking about David Bell over the years and how we felt like sometimes he managed in a way where it seemed like he felt like he just had to do something and it didn't matter if it was going to work or not. He just had to do a thing. Right. And I don't want that same philosophy from Nick Krall. I don't want him to feel like he has to go out and get a player just because he feels like he has to go out and get a player to keep the fans happy or keep the narrative moving in a certain direction. For me, if there's a good deal, if there's a right deal, I'm with you. I trust Nick Krall to get the right deal and to make a good deal for the Reds. If he doesn't go out and get somebody, if this is just the team we have to roll with, well, this team, playing everybody but Milwaukee, has been nearly 20 games over 500. That's not a bad team. And that is a team that's had a wounded pitching staff. That is a team that has abused its bullpen. That is a team that's made a lot of adjustments on the fly with its roster. And that's a team that still managed to be almost 20 games over 500. They've solidified a little bit. The lineup is fairly stable now. The pitching, both starting and relief pitching, has been pretty consistent with a few blips along the way, but has been pretty consistent. That team could do better than that over the next stretch of baseball. So then you factor in that Hunter Green's coming in about 2 weeks, maybe 3. Nick Lodolo's coming in probably about a month, maybe 5 to 6 weeks, but we'll be back in the regular season. Those are all upgrades that are going to make them even better than that. So is it the end of the world if they don't get a deal done by August 1st? I don't think so. I really would like to see some bullpen help at the very least brought in to just help augment what Alexis Diaz is trying to do, because I am worried about him just running out of juice by the end of the season. So I'd like to see that. But as far as a starter goes, as far as somebody for the rotation, it wouldn't hurt my feelings completely if they don't get somebody. And I still say that I think Connor Phillips is going to be a guy you could plug into this rotation anytime now and upgrade over a Luke Weaver. So for me, there's pieces and parts in place that Nick Krall doesn't necessarily have to act. And I would be okay if they did nothing. But would still, I put the little asterisk there because I really would like a bullpen move.
Yeah, I think they could do that. Like, I've been watching what the Braves have been doing the last couple of days. They've added a lot of different bullpen arms to not necessarily rebuild their bullpen, but definitely fill more than, I think they've got like 3 relievers at this point now. So definitely filling multiple holes there with some trades that if you'd have told me with the prospect's name, I wouldn't have known who it was. It was like way down in their prospect rankings thing. And the rankings aren't end all be all type deals to let you know if a team was an overpayer or not. But I think that the Braves are showing the Reds that, you could go make a couple of trades. I will say this. Kudos to Nick Krall not going out and getting Heath Hembree. I know he was available like a month ago. I know you believe that I'm like all about Heath Hembree like you're all about Hunter Strickland, but that's not the case. So, sorry, Jeff Hoffman. Yeah, wrong, bad Reds reliever. But I haven't seen that annoying like, oh, we're gonna go get this dude that just gave up 12 home runs in 3 days. And put him in our bullpen, and he's going to be better. Like, they're not trying to do that. I think that there are a couple of guys in the current bullpen they could probably move on from and upgrade and find upgrades for. But ultimately, I'm with you. I think that if they stand pat, that means that was the right move. I think Nick Krall knows how to do that. However, let's talk about something like if they do make a move. And our first question of the day is going to come from Subtext. By the way, if you want to join Subtext, you can join me by texting I'm into 513-597-0944, or you can follow the link in the description below You'll be the first to get Reds news and information. You can be that dude in your friend group that everybody's just like, oh yeah, he knows what's up with the Reds. Our first question here today comes from Billy Drysdale. He says, two-parter. It's the elephant in the room. Who's the best starter with some team control left in this market, and what will it cost? The price tag on these pitchers is inflated now. How does Kroll make this work for us? Could landing a good number 2 to 3 starter allow us to put Ben Lively into the bullpen to eat innings? Appreciate you, Billy, for asking us this question. We touched a little bit on the 2 to 3 starter idea, and I think that, and I saw a report yesterday that he's probably not available, but I think the best starter who theoretically could be available is Dylan Cease. The problem with that is, whether you look at baseballtradevalues.com, whether you talk about you ask anybody who covers baseball, he's going to cost a lot. Like, for instance, I looked this up the other day. Jonathan India's value, and they do it in millions on the Baseball Trade Values website. Jonathan India's value in a trade is $17 million. Dylan Cease's value in a trade is $51 million. That means that Jonathan India doesn't really even bring Rick Hahn to the table for the White Sox. So if that is what you got to start with, that means you've got to add something pretty substantial. And I think that probably prices the Reds out of the top end pitchers. The only ones that I could really think of is like maybe the Mets eat money on a Verlander or Scherzer, but they have a lot of other guys they can trade before they have to trade those two guys as well. So it's very interesting to me, because I think that if you're looking for the biggest needle mover pitcher that has team control, we saw it right there with the rental of Lucas Giolito. If you're looking for team control, you're probably talking about Noelvi Marte and Edwin Arroyo, basically the trade that the Mariners made for Luis Castillo.
Exactly. And that was just the point that I was going to make, Jeff. A 2 to 3 starter, it's just, I don't see it being reasonable or something we should even really have an eye on, because as expensive as the trade market was last year, remember that Tyler Mahle brought us CES and Spencer Steer back in a deal. This trade market is more inflated than that trade market was for pitching. There were more pitchers available last year than there are this year. So for me, it's just, I want the Reds to make the postseason, guys. I'm with you. I want them in the playoffs, but I'm not willing to buy into blow up Nick Krall's plan to do it. And any type of trade for anybody of significant long team control, not even long team control, short team control, anybody with team control remaining is going to cost to the point where it's going to derail the plan. And I think it makes much more sense to just find a bridge guy, bolster the bullpen, and wait for Green and Lodolo. I think that's the answer.
I agree with that. And I think that they're just more likely, and I've been banging this drum for like a month now, and I'm probably going to end up being wrong because I saw a rumor that the Rays are in on him, but go get Lance Lynn. Like, he should not cost a top prospect type player. He's having a down year. He's on an expiring deal, and he's a veteran pitcher that maybe the most you're going to sign him for an extension would be one more a year. So I think that that's the kind of guy that the Reds should be looking at, or a Zach Greinke from Kansas City, and especially now with that amazing Joey Votto interview with Chris Russo, who I'm not a big fan of Chris Russo, but I don't know if you saw that, Steve, but Joey Votto shouting at Mad Dog and calling him out for being a coastal elitist when it comes to baseball, and how he doesn't think that neither Joey nor Zach Greinke deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Maybe that's Joey's like subtle way of saying, go get Zach Greinke.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how that was pointing out. All right, look, let's do this, Jeff. Let's get into the comment section and start taking some questions and comments. As a matter of fact, you know what? Let's reset. Let's do this. We're going to get into your questions and comments, so don't go anywhere. We're going to get to that right after this. Thanks so much for making Locked On Reds your first listen, folks. We'll be back in your podcast feed tomorrow with a regular Friday episode, getting you set for this Dodgers series opening out on the left coast. You know, the Reds, they continue to struggle on West Coast trips throughout their history for the most part, and I'm hoping this one is a little bit different. If you can't watch the game on TV, you can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds. All right, Jeff, it's question and comment time. It's my favorite part of these lives. Let's do it. I want to start with this. It was way back in the chat section while we were talking. I'm not going to go dig for it, but it was in response to the Brewers making an in-division trade. We saw them get Santana from the Pirates getting a young shortstop in return. Where do you land on in-division trades? And I ask because the Cardinals are clearly having a bad year. And do you go to St. Louis and try and put a deal together to bring somebody in? Because for me, it's a hard, fast no, because whatever we would be sending back to the Cardinals for anybody of significant talent would haunt us for years.
I think no. I don't know that it's a hard and fast no, because the kind of the philosophy behind trading prospects for established talent just leads you to believe, okay, the trade that you're making, sure, let's see what the talent that you're getting back. And like, I don't know, man, like if the Reds could get Jack Flaherty, although Jack Flaherty is right there in that Dylan Cease, so I think he is on an expiring deal, but he would still require a top 100 prospect. But if you could get a Jack Flaherty back, and if Jack Flaherty could be healthy, that's the biggest question, then there's a chance that whatever you send to St. Louis isn't as good as Jack Flaherty. The problem becomes if it's more like a rental, like if you're looking at a bullpen arm from there or something like that, and it's a 1-year guy, then there's a chance that you might, in the long run, lose that deal. And the last team that I want to lose a deal to is an in-division team. The last team that I want to lose a deal to is the St. Louis Cardinals. So I kind of feel like they're off the table. Like, I'm always surprised whenever the Pirates make an in-division trade. Like, it makes me think the Pirates just don't really care, which there's a lot that makes me think that the Pirates don't really care, and that's just one of the many things. But I could not see the Reds making a deal with the Cardinals right now.
Yeah, I've always felt that trades in division are a bad idea. And just because, and Greg, I agree, never trade in division. It feels to me like you're setting yourself up to be tortured for years down the road when that guy hits for the other team and you think about what might have been.
Like, even if you, and I think back to like Travis Wood when the Reds sent him to Chicago for Sean Marshall. We know who won that trade. The Reds clearly lost that trade because Sean Marshall wasn't anything. And I couldn't, because I was thinking about this the other day. They're talking about, maybe Marcus Stroman is available. And I'm like, he has been good this year, but it's just, it'd be too much. Like, Marcus Stroman would easily cost Noelvi Marte, maybe like one of Chase Petty or Lyon Richardson or something like that, and then maybe somebody else on top of that as well. So I could not see the Reds trading in division for that.
All right, let's get into some of these questions and comments. Sorry, I had to switch screens because I'm old. And
I will say, while you're on the Brewers real quick, I got another subtext question, and this one was about the Brewers. So kind of look at that and then also consider this. I think we should touch on why you guys think the Reds struggle so much against the Brewers. Do they put too much pressure on themselves? Are the Brewers that good? Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. That's from Nate H. over on Subtext. I said this yesterday. I feel like this is a game plan thing, and it's a lot harder for a game plan to mean that much in baseball as opposed to, like, football or basketball or something like that. But it just seemed like it didn't matter who the Reds threw up there. The Brewers hitters had good at-bats against them all the time. And then it didn't matter who the Reds faced on the pitching mound. They had terrible at-bats against them all the time. Like, as much as I love my man Ellie, he was getting just absolutely embarrassed by Freddie Peralta yesterday. Like, there were pitches at his eyes that he was swinging at. So I mean, it's a testament to the talent that they have on their pitching staff, but I also think there's something to just kind of how their game plan works out and how they attack the Reds.
Yeah, for me, I feel like the Brewers are just in their head so much that it's managed to get the Reds players to just get outside of their normal comfort game. I think you and I talked about this a couple episodes back, where you just see a different type of at bat. You see the pitchers using a different type of approach when facing the Milwaukee hitters. I think it's just one of those things. Until they find some success against this team, they're gonna struggle against them a little bit. Again, I renew my call to never throw Christian Yelich another pitch ever, regardless of circumstance. I don't care if you're putting the winning run at the plate. I don't care if I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah.
If we're going to get beat by the Milwaukee Brewers, I don't ever again want it to be by Christian Yelich. I can't wait for that guy to retire. I am serious, Jeff. His retirement day, me and you, road trip, Milwaukee, we're going just to help him pack his damn locker. We're going.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure he leaves and gets out of the building. That's where I'm at with that.
Just going to stand up in the stands the whole game and just wave. Bye. That I talked about it the other day, that scene from Tombstone, and I can't remember the actor's name, but he was just like, well, bye. Like that's going to be our mentality for that. The other part of me that really was confused by the Reds Brewers series. Number one, I'm not going to say that this had anything to do with how the Reds played them, but they play 13 games in a year against a division opponent. They played 9 in a month. They played one series against the Brewers, not in the month of July, and we're done with them. Like, I kind of feel like the baseball schedule lends itself so that you see a team at different periods throughout the year. We happen to catch them 9 out of 13 games in 1 month. Like, we saw what the Reds did in June. Couldn't we have caught the Brewers in June? We only got 4 games against them in June. Like, I don't know. I thought the schedule was kind of weird there too. I don't think that had an effect, but yeah.
All right, let's get into some of these comments. We're going to start with Next Level 44. He says, trade Arroyo, that's Edwin Arroyo, for starting pitching. Keep India, and then if someone gets injured, you can put someone in for him. Well, I don't know. Is Edwin Arroyo by himself going to bring a significant pitching return, Jeff? I think the market's too inflated for that. And I mean, to get a decent starting pitcher, I think you'd have to trade both of those guys together. I think India and Arroyo is a piece that might get you a decent pitcher in return. But that leads me into also, I think we probably need to have a little bit more of a Jonathan India talk, because in my mind, he's probably the single number one trade piece that Nick Kroll is discussing right now.
And I think the most important thing about Jonathan India being in trade discussions is that he is either the centerpiece of a deal and you have like one other guy, or he's the only guy in the deal. Like, I don't think they're going to make a trade that includes Jonathan India, a top 100 prospect, and a almost top 100 prospect like that. That's a very, very rich deal. I think that there is a tier. There's like different tiers of prospects that you're looking for specific types of talent coming back in a trade if you send that guy away. Like, Edwin Arroyo is in the top tier of prospects that the Reds could offer. And I think because of that, you're not trading Edwin Arroyo for Lance Lynn. You're trading Edwin Arroyo for Dylan Cease or Jack Flaherty. And this is the type of pitcher. I'm not saying we're trading him to St. Louis, but you're going for a number 2 or 3 pitcher with Edwin Arroyo with the idea that he is the top dude part of that deal. It's interesting to me too, Steve. I don't know what you think about this. And it's hard to say that prospects are untouchable for me, but Lindsey Crosby from Locked On MLB Prospects said Edwin Arroyo and Chase Petty should be deemed untouchable, along with anyone that's been called up to the major leagues this year.
You know, untouchable it's a strong phrase. It's hard. These are guys, Chase Petty currently pitching for the Dayton Dragons. You just never know.
He's in double. He's in Chad.
Oh, did he move up? Sorry.
Yeah.
So
But still, double A. I mean, yeah.
Double A. I mean, this is a guy that you're not necessarily sure what's going to happen still along the way. So if you can get a big return, I don't know that you make anybody untouchable that far down in the minor league system. But I put Connor Phillips in that spot right now. I don't trade Connor Phillips for anybody in this kind of deal because I think he's ready to pitch in the majors now. So I think that's the difference. If a player's still years away, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to just label them untouchable.
Yeah, and I think with all of this, the key question is, why are you making that trade? It's got to be like, I look at, could you package a Reese Hines and somebody else for Lance Lynn and be okay with it? Yeah. If you package Edwin Arroyo for Lance Lynn or Noelvi Marte or Connor Phillips or, I don't know, even Lyon Richardson looks a little bit expensive for Lance Lynn right now. Like, there's got to be a level here. And Nick Kroll knows what that level is. There's baseballtradevalues.com that helps me understand where some people are with this, but that's not how every general manager makes their assumptions. They all have different feelings on things. So I still think that top prospects like that, it's going to be hard to stomach unless you are getting a bona fide dude with multiple years of control.
Jake checks in and says the best deadline move the Reds can make is not wearing the script jerseys anymore.
Not a fan of that.
Not a big league uniform, he says. You know what? I don't mind that particular jersey, by the way. Right now, this City Connect is kind of my favorite look. I think just because it's new, but I'm okay with the jerseys, but that's funny. I like that. That's the best.
They dominate in the City Connects too. Like, I'd love to look at a statistic. I think that it's like they average like 6 runs a game when they wear those uniforms. I love those, but I disagree with Jake. I like the script Reds uniforms.
Trenton checks in and says, what prospects would you not consider trading? This follows up what we were just talking about. I said Connor Phillips. Is there anybody within the system that is a hard, fast no for you?
It would really be hard for me to sign off on a Noelvi Marte trade because I know that he would get a lot in return, but again, you'd have to get a lot in return. But here's my thought on that, because I think we might be seeing, and this is going to require lots more discussion than just this point that I'm about to make, but I think we're seeing the final year of Joey Votto in a Reds uniform. And with that being said, you're going to move CES to first, and you're either going to move Spencer Steer to third and have a hole in the outfield, or you're going to call up Noelvi Marte and put him at third. Which the Reds have actually kind of been setting him up to do as he's moved up through the minor league system. So I almost think, and kind of where you are with Connor Phillips and the fact that he is basically a major leaguer at this point, he just needs to be called up and actually play in major league games. I kind of think Noelvi Marte is there as well. And it's just that there's a glut of position talent on this team right now is the only reason he's not in Cincinnati.
All right, let's get into some specifics. I like when people propose things because I like your reaction to them. So go ahead and go with this one, Jeff.
Michael Kopech and Joe Kelly for Austin Hendrick and Lyon Richardson would be dope. Yes, it would. I know we lose a young pitching stud, but our draft we just had makes it easier. Yes, and I kind of like James's point on the second part of this thing. That trade does not get it done, though. Like, Michael Kopech and Joe Kelly are not coming for Austin Hendrick and Lyon Richardson. Lyon Richardson is the headliner in that deal. There's a lot of folks that just don't know that Austin Hendrick's ever going to figure out how to not strike out. And by not strike out, like, I'm pretty sure his minor league strikeout percentage is above 40% all the way. And it's not like Ellie. Ellie had a high strikeout percentage as well, but he was hitting 300 or 350 or whatever. Austin Hendrick's hitting like 220. There's something about Austin Hendrick that he is a project prospect at best right now, and you're not going to trade you're not going to trade Lyon Richardson and a project prospect for Michael Kopech and Joe Kelly. Like, I know that Michael Kopech hasn't quite been what the White Sox thought he was going to be, but there's still lots of intrigue there. And intrigue is almost as valuable as actual talent when it comes to the trade deadline. Like, I something Lindsay and I talked about a little bit was the fact that Nick Senzel might actually have more trade value than we give him credit for right now, simply because he's had a pretty decent season. And there might be some intrigue from another general manager that says, you know what? I could fix him. But yes, that specific trade, I don't see it getting done. But I do agree with James's point. Lyon Richardson is a perfect example of a guy who the Reds could trade and almost not even miss. Not to say him personally, but the fact that they just drafted Rhett Lauder, and Rhett Lauder, according to Baseball America, is much higher rated than Lyon Richardson is. Rhett Lauder could be in the major leagues late next year. So I think that, and Lyon Richardson might be a guy that you could see in spring training, but also I don't know where he fits into this rotation. He'd probably be a bullpen piece / starting rotation depth next year. And I think that you could probably get some interesting pieces with him. So I think that that's an interesting part because the Reds had a pretty good draft when it comes to pitching.
So Michael Shin has an interesting comment just because I've been seeing this over the last couple of days and I'd like to get your take on it. He's talking about Snell and Hader and what a statement that would be. I don't think Snell is a possibility at all. First of all,
Sure
secondly, what about Hader? What do we think about Hader? Because it intrigues me a little bit, but I think he would cost too much.
He would definitely cost a top 100 prospect at least. This gives me cross sport reference vibes for a minute. This gives me Orlando Brown vibes if they get Josh Hader. Like Bengals take Patrick Mahomes as left tackle, Reds take Brewers closer. Like that'd be kind of cool. The issue would be, and I don't know.
Logical move is what it is.
Yes, psychological. You're like, hey, we got your guy there, Milwaukee. What are you going to do now? I mean, they're not going to face Milwaukee anymore this season, so they're probably like, yeah, whatever. But I would like that angle for it. I just think, especially both those guys together, San Diego would be looking.
Break it apart. Let's just remove Snell from the equation. I don't think that's the thing. But let's talk about Hader. What would you give up to bring Hader to the big league bullpen right now?
It would cost a top 100 dude for sure.
Well, are we talking about number 99 or are we talking about number 6? I mean, where's your line? Who would you send? Who would you be willing to give up, Jeff?
Would that be a Noelvi Marte trade? I just said he was untouchable.
Right. But I think that's probably the neighborhood.
That's what they're looking for.
Hader's not going to be cheap. Yeah.
No, it's not. And I think there's a difference between bullpen help and bullpen holy hell. And that's bullpen holy hell. Like they make that deal at the deadline and we're all going, what? They got Hader? Like maybe even with that crackling voice as well. Yeah, Snell and Hader together would be a Shohei Ohtani deal, and that's just not happening.
All right, let me get to another one. So a lot of the talk in the chat today, Jeff, is also centering around Jonathan India and trade him, don't trade him in season versus trade him this coming off season. You know, I really feel like if there's a decent deal for pitching made at this deadline, it involves Jonathan India. I don't see how it doesn't. Could India be on this team the rest of the year? Yeah. If Nick Krall finds himself in a stand pat situation, then that's okay. And then I do agree that if Jonathan India finishes this season as a Red, he won't start next season as a Red.
No, I think that he's probably a winter meetings type move. I just don't know. If Nick Krall is on the phone with somebody and he can get himself either a middle of the rotation starter or a starter with a couple of years of control, and they're saying India and maybe like a not top 100 prospect in your system and then a project prospect, I think I'd kind of do that deal. I understand the argument about like chemistry and all of that stuff. I am firmly in the camp of what Joey Votto said, and that is winning builds chemistry. So if you just win, you have chemistry. Like he said before, and I love the quote that he had. He was just like, I've been on teams where we got along greatly, like we were best friends and we won 65 games. And I've been on teams where I've hated guys and we went to the playoffs. Now, he never went into detail about the players that he hated, because then you pinpoint it to be like, well, there's 3 years that you went to the playoffs, so we could probably guess who you might not have liked. But it's still one of those old adages, and I think most players, former players and current players, agree. It's just like, yeah, I like the guys next to me. I like them a lot more when we win.
Aaron says that he's a keep India guy. He doesn't think you get a starter for India. I don't either. Let me be clear. I don't think you get a decent starting pitcher for Jonathan India. It's going to be India plus. Now, maybe not a big plus, but it's going to be an India plus somebody else, maybe a low A prospect, somebody that's not really on our radar right now. But it's gonna have to be at least an India plus to get a starting pitcher that would make any meaningful impact, I think, and maybe I'm just at the top of the list here when it comes to people who are bullish on Lance Lynn, and I could be completely wrong, but I think Lance Lynn would make a difference on this team. I also think Jonathan India for Lance Lynn is a vast overpay, and like the White Sox would fall out of their chairs if Nick Krall ever said it, and would drop the phone trying to say, yes, we agree. But I definitely wouldn't do that deal, because that's a huge overpay. So I think they could get somebody for him, but I think there's a vast. I honestly think, I thought the guy that they would get a decent starting pitcher for Jonathan India, I thought that guy was Lucas Giolito. And the fact that he's off the market now, obviously it's not going to be him. So it's harder for me to kind of pinpoint that. I think maybe you have Jonathan India's value a little bit higher than I do. And I'm not, and again, before everybody blows up at me, I'm not talking bad about Jonathan.
# Steve hates Jonathan India.
Exactly. But I feel like this pitching market is so inflated that
it is.
Even if we say Jonathan India is X ranking of a second baseman or middle infielder, just the price of pitching right now, I don't think it gets it done. And you talk about Lance Lynn, there's a time that I would say Lance Lynn is a needle mover, but I mean, his numbers haven't been great. Does he rebound? I would like to think that he could. He's been doing it for a long time, but it's not a guarantee. It's not something where they announce that trade and I'm over here going, Jeff, it is time to record the emergency show. Let's go. It's not one of those kind of moves where, so including Jonathan India in that, getting that guy in return, there's a whole lot of what if in there. There's a whole lot of maybe if you turn your head sideways and squint, it could work out kind of thing. And if Nick Krall's going to go out and make a move, I want it to be one where you and I can look at it and go, here's why that guy is better. Here is why trading away Jonathan India was in the best interest of the team. Not what if, not maybe, not I hope it works out. It needs to be a definite move, because the chemistry thing, winning does build chemistry, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that there's not going to be a momentary blip, a momentary disruption of everything that goes on when you make these deals. So if you're going to make that trade-off, there needs to be some value to it.
What if it's Lance Lynn and either Joe Kelly, or I think Aaron Bummer's had kind of a bad year, but he's a younger relief pitcher, a 29-year-old relief pitcher with multiple years of control, or Michael Kopech. What if, in one fell swoop, Nick Krall gets a starter and a relief pitcher with him?
With India?
Yeah.
Straight up? Yeah.
Because baseball trade values would say that they could get that done. Now, I don't necessarily know if that is the same valuation that Rick Hahn, White Sox general manager, would have on that, but that would be intriguing.
It would be. How about this? Old friend alert. What would you think about the Reds pairing up with the Tigers and trying to make a move for Michael Lorenzen?
He's on an expiring deal, and I don't think he would cost a ton either. I think the Reds could get him for he is having a good year, but I think that he is a guy that they could get for a stomachable, if that's a word, deal. Palatable.
Stomachable, palatable. There you go. Oh, Alabama College was hard on you, my friend. Hard on you.
Hey, I also went to school in Kentucky.
Okay, Randy says trade Senzel before he gets hurt. Does Senzel have any trade value? We talk about this. I mean, I know he doesn't have the trade value we'd like for him to have, but maybe for a team looking for somebody to platoon against left-handed bats, you can get something.
Maybe you get a middle relief guy, like maybe a sixth inning guy. Like you're not going to get a setup guy. You're definitely not going to get a closer. But and the other thing for me could he be like a kicker in a deal? Like, hey, we're doing this. We're close though. I don't know, Nick. I think I need a little bit more. And then you'd be like, well, but what about Nick Senzel? You're like, all right, cool, we'll do it. I could see that being the case. I think
Carlton Van Hoy says Lorenzen will be more expensive than people think. I think that's a fair point. I think that's a fair point. But that's not because we're undervaluing what we think Lorenzen's going to cost. I think that's a true statement for any pitcher. Again, inflated market. Yeah. So in what Lorenzen would have cost last year is going to be different than what Lorenzen costs this year, even if the statistics were identical, just because there's less pitchers available. So I agree with this. Lorenzen, has been a good starter this year. He's going to cost something. I don't know that he's going to cost a crazy amount, but
I might be undervaluing Lorenzen with this deal, but I don't know. I don't think I am. Resigns in Lyon Richardson for Michael Lorenzen.
So it seems like there's a separate side chat going on over on the Discord server, Jeff. So I'm going to pull this up and let you weigh in on it. Kaiser's posting. They're having their own trade talks over on our Discord server right now. And this is their proposed deal. India, Arroyo, Hines, Hendricks for Cease, Kelly, and Bummer.
If that is the deal, I'd take it. I don't think the White Sox take that deal. I think you'd have to do Indy, Arroyo, Hines, Hendricks, probably Senzel, probably Barrero for Cease.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And maybe even somebody else. I don't know. Like Cease is ridiculously expensive because he has multiple years of control, and on a lot of teams, I don't think on the Reds, maybe even on the Reds, he would be an ace. Not a number 2 or 3, he would be an ace.
All right.
You remember what he did to the Reds? Do you remember what he did to the Reds in 2021? That stupid game that he pitched like a complete game shutout and had like 3 hits. That was back when pitchers had.
Tried to block that from my mind, Jeffrey.
I was at that game. It was painful. I've been in some good games. I've been in some bad games too. No to trading India.
But Mark says no to trading India. He's the team leader. This team is 10 games out without India. No one else on the team is a viable captain with a capital C. I think this is a shot at my.
Doesn't like Matt McClain.
I guess so. Listen, first of all, I know there was some pushback for me wanting to anoint Matt McClain the captain already, and I don't care. I'll die on that hill. I'm sticking with it. He has shown me everything I need to see. I want him here for the long term, and how better to do that than to give him a contract already before the end of this season and go ahead and slap the darn C on his chest when you do it. That shows commitment. That shows what you're building around. That shows the direction you're setting for the future. Jonathan India is clearly the odd man out. The Reds, listen, folks, the Reds do not leak information. If you hear something coming from the Reds, if you hear something coming through the beat writers, it's because the Reds wanted that information out there. They're already committed to it. The fact now that the writers have talked not once, but twice about trading Jonathan India is all you need to know. He's as good as gone. It's just a matter if it's going to be now or if it's going to be in the offseason. They're trading Jonathan India. He is not in the long-term plans for this franchise, period. That's how the Reds operate. If you ever have dealt with the Reds PR machine, you will know there are not uncontrolled releases of information in the city of Cincinnati surrounding this baseball team.
It was that way with Luis Castillo. Luis Castillo was rumored to be traded the year before he actually was. And Nick Krall slow plays some of these where it's like you hear a rumor about a Reds player going somewhere. That doesn't mean it's going to happen in the next day or even the next week, but there's going to be a point at which he gets traded. Because you're right, like the rumors do not get leaked by the Reds very often. Like even when you hear or you see like tweets or something like that, like John Heyman or Bob Nightingale or whoever, I rarely see Jeff Passan tweet rumors. He tweets reports. But, some of those other guys, when they tweet their stuff like the Reds called on this guy or the Reds were in on this guy, like that almost never happens. That almost never goes through. But usually what happens is a trade goes through and you're like, well, that player was similar to that guy, but he wasn't exactly that guy. Like there's a tiny modicum of truth when it comes to Reds rumors, but not usually are they completely true all the time.
Next Level 44 asks for us to hear him out. He says, are we forgetting about TJ Antone returning soon? He's kind of like Lorenzen, but better. We could trade Edwin Arroyo for some other decent players for starters, etc. TJ Antone, we've talked about, Jeff. I am a big fan of TJ Antone. I think when he's healthy, when he's on, his stuff is nearly unhittable at times. The question is, coming off of not one, but two Tommy John surgeries, can you realistically put any faith, confidence towards him being someone you're going to rely on to bolster this bullpen this year? I don't think you can. If it happens, great. Yeah. I'll be so excited. I'll feel great for TJ Antone. I'll feel great for the fan base. It'll be great. But I don't think you can rely on that. I don't think you can even pretend to try and count on it happening a little bit. I think you have to pretend in your mind that he's not pitching.
I'm going to be very happy when he comes back, but I agree. I don't think you can put any expectations on him because who knows? I mean, like he could come back, pitch a week, and then go back on the injured list for a week or two with some kind of other thing that goes on. That's usually what happens for guys that have been away for a long time. So I think that expectations are rough to put on TJ Antone. Could he be a guy? Absolutely, he could be a guy. He's shown it before, but he's going to be a totally different guy after this trade. I think that even if he does pan out, because this is where I get they need one arm in the trade deadline thing. Because even if TJ Antone comes back and he totally pans out and he's absolutely amazing and he slots right back into his old role and you've got two closers, you've got to replace Daniel Duarte and Fernando Cruz. Neither one of those guys are playoff relievers. Fernando Cruz, the book is out on. You lay off the splitter, you hit anything else that comes plateward, and you're going to clobber it. Daniel Duarte is just super inconsistent with his control. And so if you're really splitting hairs and looking at a playoff bullpen, neither one of those guys belong. So you've got to replace them somehow. TJ Antone pans out. That's great. He replaces one of them. So they need another guy. So they got to go trade for another guy. I don't know what Tony Santillan's going to be. His limited appearances that we've seen from him and the fact that almost immediately after he pitches, they send him down tells me they don't think that he's going to be much of anything moving forward, which is kind of a bummer to think about because for a moment we thought he could be really big in this bullpen a couple of years ago, but it kind of feels like that they're looking at him as though they don't expect any. And when the Reds don't expect anything from you, you don't pitch in the major leagues.
All right, Jeff, this next one's going to be fun. I'm kind of interested to see where you're going to land on this because I know where I'm going to land on this. Barry Campbell says, don't be surprised if TJ Friedel is in a packaged deal. There's some logic to this. Mm-hmm. Well, let's go down this lane for a minute and see where we land, because I have for many seasons now advocated for trading guys that have outlier seasons when their trade value is at its highest. That sounds an awful lot like TJ Friedel right now, unless you believe that the TJ Friedel we see is a 5-year sustainable type of player, if this is who he really is. If this is an outlier great year and he's going to go back to being the guy he was last year or the year before, do you trade him now? Do you try and Brandon Drury him right on out of town?
Not Brandon Drury, because I don't want prospects for him. That's a tough one because it's hard for me to say that he's going to sustain this, but I will make this point. I didn't expect anything from him. Whenever he was called up, I didn't expect him to be a part of this plan. I didn't expect him to be an everyday guy. He has proven to me that he's an everyday guy. He hits righties, he hits lefties. He is fast on the base paths. He has good range in the outfield. He could have a better arm. I don't love his arm, but really everything else about his game is pretty solid. I don't know, man. Like, I'd have a hard time trading him because I don't think you're going to get the value, because I think most scouting departments probably have the same opinion of him, is that, okay, he's been good, but how long are we going to trust that? And I mean, the only way that you're getting something big for TJ Friedl is if he is with Jonathan India or if he is with a big time prospect. And that feels like an overpay for me. And then my other question is, who fits in that spot in the outfield? Because he's an everyday outfielder. And the Reds only have 2 everyday outfielders. It's him and Will Benson. Like, as much as I love Jake Fraley, they play him at DH enough for me to know that the Reds don't think he's that great of a fielder.
Jonathan Haven says he loves Friedl, but he's absolutely tradable.
Maybe.
This is a hard one. I mean, you make great points. Like, who do they replace him with? Do you trade Friedl? And then
you'd have to get an outfielder back.
Yeah,
it feels like you'd be trading a guy to get a guy that you already have.
Yeah, but still, I mean, I have to practice what I preach, right? I have to not pick and choose when I'm gonna stick with my philosophies. And my philosophy says it's time to this would be a good time to trade TJ Friedl.
So, okay, and I also want to qualify this. He's not untouchable. He's not in that list of guys that I don't want to trade at any cost. The issue just becomes, what happens when you trade him? What are you getting back? Do you think Noelvi Marte can play in the outfield? Do you think Jonathan India can play in the outfield? Because I don't think the Reds think that. They haven't moved him there yet. I don't know. And Blake Dunn is a couple years away. And at best, I think Blake Dunn is TJ Friedl anyway. So I think that overall, he'd be hard to trade because I don't know where his value is.
All right, let's get a few more of these in, Jeff. I know we've crossed over the 1 hour mark here. You guys in the comments, you are amazing. I love doing these shows. And guys, shout out to Jeff Carr. This is his anniversary, and I can only imagine that Hannah is off camera somewhere glaring at him right now. That's
she's at work right now. She's fine.
Okay. All right, so you're safe for just a few more minutes. Let's get a few more questions, and then we'll get you out of here, my friend. Stuart Fairchild. Let's talk about him for just a minute. We talk about outfielders. We talk about maybe making a deal with one. Who do you replace them with another? Is Fairchild somebody that could be of help short term? Is Fairchild good enough? Let me try this again, Jeff. Is Fairchild good enough that you would be willing to trade TJ Friedl in the right deal, knowing you're going to have to play Stuart Fairchild in center the rest of the season?
No. He's too streaky for me. Like, I think he had a good September last year and had us all intrigued by that. And he's had a couple of good stretches this year, but he's also had a couple of stretches where he was an automatic out. Like, I look at the guys who have been in this lineup while the lineup has been producing, and I say that is the lineup that the Reds love. That's the lineup that they want to hold together as much as they possibly can. Stu Fairchild's been down in the minors for a while now. Like, he was playing in this lineup every day or almost every day whenever we were like, the lineup's a problem. And I think that that's not totally his fault, but I don't think that he was the reason that it got better, because he's not been here. So I don't think that I see him. And I found this was interesting the other day because Jose Siri hit a home run for the Rays, and it was his 20th home run of the year. Like, I don't think the Reds thought that Jose Siri would be a 20 home run guy whenever he was in the minor leagues.
Nope.
I think that Stuart Fairchild's kind of one of those guys that you're just like not really sure about. And maybe he gets an everyday opportunity somewhere and flourishes, but the Reds aren't the team that actually called him up. They traded him whenever he was in the minor leagues, and he came up with, I think, Seattle. And he's been on.
Do you think this is a fair assessment of Fairchild?
Yes. Yeah.
Randy says Fairchild
focus my point.
For a player. I figured that's kind of where you were going. But
Long way to say that, yeah.
I think that does Pierre checking in for the Carr family. There you go, Jeff.
Thank you, Pierre.
All right, let's try and get to one or two more of these, and let's get out of here. Or you know what? I'm going to watch it, but I do want to ask you about this, Jeff, because it's still lingering around. It's lurking on the horizon. Kurt Casale on the disabled list with, I don't know. First off, I don't know how you get hurt when you don't ever play, but here's where we're at. He's on the injured list with a bruised ego or a contusion to his playing time or something along those lines. They've continued to kick this can down the road with this 3-catcher setup. Casale's going to be eligible to come off of the injured list pretty quick here. What do they do? Is there any scenario that someone trades for Casale? Is it inevitable that they cut him? What's happening here?
You might get cash for Casale. I think that Kurt Casale gets the Will Myers treatment. Thanks for your time. Glad you're healthy. See you later. Like
any news says he got a
bench
from
splitter.
the bench.
Yeah. Bench splinter. Yeah. Yeah. What's he got? Like 3 at bats this month? Like
I don't understand. I don't like he's got some dirt on somebody, and I could
see him being that guy that like maybe in a year or two he's a coach here or something, but I don't. And are they gonna put him in the Corky Miller role? Maybe.
Could be. Let's end with this, because I was reading just a little while ago. As you know, I've been away for a couple days, so I was trying to play catch up. And did you see this thing from Heyman that very quietly Buddy Bell has resigned from the Reds organization? No real mention, no real to do about it. Something going on there, Jeff, that we should be keeping an eye on? Or
is it possible he was part of the old regime of how the Reds were ran, and now that the Reds are running through Nick Krall, he's not needed anymore?
Or, hear me out, I've long speculated that when the window of the youth opened, David Bell would get promoted. I wonder if that's going to be a legacy job. And I'm just saying, David Bell's contract is something we have avoided talking about a whole lot. But with that news breaking, and maybe it's time to have that conversation.
Here's the take nobody wants to hear. And it is not coming straight from me, although I agree with this take. Our friend Steve Mancuso over at Reds Content Plus said, that's right? Reds Content Plus, yes. Steve Mancuso tweeted out last night. He was just like, "Boy, it's gonna look real weird when the Castellini's plan to make Barry Larkin the manager next year follows a Manager of the Year award for David Bell."
Well, you know, the Cardinals have fired a guy that was getting Manager of the Year votes. It's not unheard of. And there's all of that interlinking between the Cardinals and the Reds.
But you're right. He will be promoted, not
promoted. I thought it was very interesting. We'll end with this little fun jab from Nathan. Joey's going to be the manager. Yeah.
God, he'd be ejected every other day.
Every other day.
I love Joey. I love Joey Votto so much, but there's no way he's going to exercise restraint when it comes to an umpire. That just won't happen.
Not even a little bit. All right. That's going to do it. Before we get out of here, don't forget you can catch every pitch of the Reds hometown broadcast on SiriusXM with the SXM app. Just download the app and search the word Reds. This has been great, Jeff. I love these lives. The comment section, I got to tell you, when we started doing these lives, the comment section went by at a leisurely pace. We could address each and every one of the comments, spend time talking, and it was just very intimate and very small social gathering. And now it's like we're having a party. Happy. It's a rager every time we go live.
To see how it's growing.
Love it. It's so much fun. Thank you guys so much for being here, joining us live. Make sure you're subscribed to all the things. Hit the like button down there. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Sign up for the Discord. It's in the description of the show. Hit Jeff up on Subtext. We're everywhere. We'll talk to you on Twitter. Jeff, get us out of here.
Thanks so much for joining us here on this special live bonus edition tomorrow. We're going to get you ready for the Dodgers series and continue speculating about trade deadline things. Maybe the Reds will have made a trade by then. Who knows? Probably not, but maybe. That'll be all on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Reds. Thanks as always for joining us. We look forward to seeing you here tomorrow because we are Locked On Reds every single day.
Did Hannah get you a nice nightie for your anniversary?
Nightcap.